We are live to another great episode of Wesam's World. Really excited about our episode today. A quick reminder, if you're listening live, make sure you follow us on Instagram. And remember that our show is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and also YouTube. Just to clarify, Peyton, that's right after the show or Friday morning? The full episode is available for people?
Yeah, Friday morning.
Friday morning. Sorry, I caught you off guard there.
That's okay.
That's okay.
I forgot which mic was mine, but that's okay.
No, it's all good.
Apple Podcast is actually available a couple hours after our live airing on Thursdays.
Well, good to know.
There we go.
So if you missed it live, you can jump in right into Apple Podcast right after the live broadcast, or you can watch us on YouTube or listen on Spotify. Our guest today is someone very special. This is a person who has lived a great life and still I hope has more life to live because I mean I feel like in the short span, maybe like 5 years you've lived like 10 lifetimes from what you've done. This is a person and just for our viewers, you were the chief scientist for the Mars rover mission for 7 years ish. You run triathlons and Ironmans, and you are a world travel geologist, and the stories that I've heard through the grapevine of your experiences have made me very interested, and I think they should be shared with the world. So, John Grotzinger, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks, Wesam. It's great to be here.
I said your last name correctly, right?
You did.
Okay,
Nailed
perfect.
It. Yeah.
That's always my one of my nerve-wracking things, saying people's last names correctly. Just for a brief background for everybody, tell us a little bit about your expertise in geology and where you went to school and where you got your doctorate from and everything.
Yeah, so I was a kind of kid growing up that had too much energy. Probably today I'd be heavily medicated. Needed to be outdoors, needed to be running around, had a hard time learning, discovered science outdoors. Mm-hmm. Fast forward 20 years, I got my college degree in geology because you get to do all the sciences, chemistry, physics, math, biology, but you get to do it outdoors. And I found that the physical activity of making geological maps, which is like working on a puzzle, was really gratifying and intellectually stimulating, and I just kept going. Got more degrees. When you don't know what to do, just keep going to college.
Yeah. I like what you said earlier out in the lobby. You said, what was it? BS and what was it? Please.
Well, so BS is bullshit.
Yeah.
A master's degree, MS, is more shit, and a PhD is piled higher and deeper. Just dig in.
You've got to travel all over the world because of this. You've traveled to where was it? Siberia, Middle East, Africa. Was it Alaska? Correct.
Northern Canada.
Northern Canada.
Yeah.
You've gone everywhere.
Yeah.
And this is purely geology-based studies, correct?
Yeah, all geology. Geology is a mature science. It's been around for a couple hundred years. People have been looking at rocks for a long time, wondering what they are. And I realized that you had to kind of go to the far corners of the earth to find new science in
Absolutely.
the rocks. Yeah.
So we'll get into your adventures here on Earth towards the end of the episode. But what made you transition from studying rocks here on Earth to rocks on Mars?
So the really short answer is that about 15 years ago, I was asked to lead this Mars mission. And you got to think of it as a robotic geologist. It needs to walk around, drive around, look around. And because of all my Earth experience, they realized when they had built this thing, okay, it's supposed to be looking for these things. We can talk about that. But how do you do that? How do you go about doing that? So I had been dropped out of helicopters and airplanes, and you land and you have to make something happen. So it's kind of the same thing. A rover falls out of the sky on Mars, it lands on rocks, and then you got to figure out what they are. How do you do that? That's the reason I got picked.
So you're more focused, and your expertise is on the science-based aspect of the Mars rover mission. And so you have to team up with people who are more engineered based, correct? In order to make that happen, to get basically the rover over there.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a really cool thing about that job, leading the Mars science team, because I got to work hand in hand with the lead engineer. And, science is basically about discovering things that were never known, and engineering is about creating things that never existed. And, that synergy where there's what scientists call a hypothesis, think of it as an idea that you get about the way the world should work. Well, then you need to make some kind of a gizmo that will allow you to make those observations. So the idea that the science has is made real by the engineering that gives you the capability to test your hypothesis.
Wow.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your experience working on the Mars rover mission and what you guys discovered while you were over there.
Yeah, so there are actually there's a whole series of these Mars rover missions, and let's go all the way back to the 1960s with the Apollo mission, where the U.S. is in the Cold War with Russia, and the moon becomes kind of a marathon. You got to get there. Who's going to get there first? And the idea in the beginning was it's all engineering. We just need to land people on the moon. And then when you get there, you got to say, okay, now we're here. What are we going to do? Well, there's a lot of rocks, ain't much more. Let's bring some back and see what they tell us. So that capability, that decade of technological development, then paved the way for smaller, less expensive missions to explore other planets. So Mars is closest. If you go beyond the moon, where do you go to next? It's Mars. Mars also looks a lot like Earth, unlike the moon that doesn't look anything like the Earth. And Mars, importantly, we could tell that there was evidence of water on that planet. And if you ask what is the most necessary condition to have life develop on a planet, it's water. Without water, you're not going to get life as we know it. So that led to some missions in the 1970s that landed, and they scooped up some soil on the surface of Mars, and then they dropped some water on it, and you see if anything's living. And the answer was no. So that led to Congress saying, okay, well, there's nothing up there. Let's do something else. So about 20 years, NASA reinvented itself, and they realized that maybe there's no life there today, but there could have been in the past. And so then entered geology, because when you talk about the past is encoded, preserved in rocks. So you can think of rocks as time capsules. And when you open up the time capsule, you're not quite sure what you're going to get, but you unpack it, and you need tools to do that. And the most important tool is to be able to say, no, I don't like that rock, but I do like that one over there. So if we landed over here, let's now drive over there so we can get to the good stuff.
Right.
So then you land a rover as a technology demonstration in the 1990s. It worked. So then after that, in the next decade, you go to landing a rover that now looks for evidence of water, and yes, it confirmed it. And then in the next decade, you land a rover that now has a lot of complex instruments on it to make measurements. That's the one I led. And that was successful. And then you go to the mission that's operating now, which is drilling and collecting rock samples to return to Earth. In the next decade, they will come back to Earth.
And is this rover going to blast off from Mars? Or are we going down to Mars to pick up the rover and bring it back?
Okay, so fun thing about the film industry, everybody's probably seen The Martian, based on the book by Andy Weir, who happens to have been a software engineer at NASA. So he saw the architecture for Mars sample return and wrote a story about humans instead of rocks. So at one point in that movie, it's good. It gives credit to collecting rocks. There is a scene where they're collecting rocks to return. But the whole thing about the MAV, remember the MAV, it blows down in the wind? Yeah, and then that's no good. So then they have to go, and then they have to unearth an old rover that they use for its radio. So basically, the whole architecture of that book and that movie is what we see with Mars sample return. So the first phase is the one we're in now: land a rover, drill rocks, put them in something that looks like a bowling ball, leave it there, then send another mission that will land a very, very simple rover that will grab the bowling ball, and we'll continue on with this. You launch them up into orbit, and then you got to go get them. So it takes a decade, many, many missions to bring them back.
Very interesting. We're going to keep this conversation going, but we're going to take a quick commercial break. And we are back. Bless you. Bless you. Okay. So with these rock samplings that are going to be brought back to Earth, one of the things I find super interesting is the aspect of making sure you're not contaminating any of the rocks with Earth's germs, that are in the air or fungus in the air or whatever. Well, do you have any experience with that? Do you guys and you know what I mean? Because I'm like, how do you stop that from happening exactly?
That's an amazingly insightful question. So there is a huge concern about that for two reasons. One is we don't want to do what's called forward contamination of Mars. If there is no life on Mars, we don't want to bring ourselves to it and then suddenly have bacteria all over Mars. From a science point of view, if the objective is to look for evidence that life may have once been on Mars, we're looking for things that look like bacteria. And so we want to be sure that if we bring a rock back and we find bacteria in it, that it's not our bacteria that hitched a ride from Earth. So NASA is very focused on this. It's incredibly stringent. There's a lot of effort that's made to clean everything off, make it sterile, package it up, and land it so that we can greatly reduce, if not completely eliminate, the chance for forward contamination.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm
It's called Planetary Protection. It's an entire division of NASA.
Yeah, because I was reading a little bit about the rover, or not the rover. What would it be called? The thing they landed on the asteroid. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Well, that's a kind of a rover. It's a robot. Call it a robot.
The robot they landed on the asteroid, and they were trying to figure out how to open up this thing without contaminating it. And it was like a big success when they were like, we finally figured out how to do it.
Yeah, they got it jammed.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a crisis. That's Apollo 13 moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, real quick, how accurate in terms of science and technical aspects was The Martian, in your opinion?
Amazing. Best science fiction movie in the last 30 years. And the reason why is it brought the science back into fiction. And so it was super fun. We had a special screening of it at the ArcLight Theater in Pasadena. JPL scientists and engineers were invited, and everybody sat down and we went through the film and rolled it. And when you saw bullshit, you said bullshit. And so the room was packed with engineers that know what they're doing, scientists that know what they're doing. I was sitting next to David Baltimore, who's a Nobel laureate in biology. So when we got to the business of potatoes, I leaned over and I said, David, what do you think? And he goes, it's reasonable. It could happen. And so what was really great about that is I think that is kind of the genius of Andy Weir. He took a broad architecture that involves bringing back rocks from Mars, but added human drama to it and real science that is all fictional, but it's all reasonable and responsible.
That's awesome.
Got very high scores by us.
That's really great.
Yeah.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
I remember being very impressed because it seemed like they were very intertwined with and had a good relationship with the science and everything. It seemed like it was real. That's why when I was watching it, I was like, "Oh wow!" Okay.
Yeah, there's only two things. One of them will be obvious when I explain it to you. When the MAV tips over in the wind, that's never going to happen, because the Martian atmosphere is very, very thin compared to Earth. So it can blow with hurricane force, 2 times hurricane force, and there's just not enough density in the atmosphere to push and create pressure against the rocket to tip it over.
Oh. So what's that? Is that just going to feel like a regular gust of wind then if there's like hurricane force winds?
Yeah, if you were in a hurricane, it would feel like a breath of air.
Really?
Yeah, that's the force.
But then it's going at like 200 miles per hour, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's kind of hard to wrap my mind around, actually.
Yeah, that's the fun thing about planetary science is that one hand, the planets are all kind of similar. They're rounded balls floating in space, but they're all a little bit different. And Mars is very much like Earth, but that's one of the big differences. Yeah. And then the other one was when Matt Damon goes flying away with what we call an uncontrolled vector. He pinpricks the finger in his spacesuit that gives him propulsion, and then he meets up with the spaceship.
Yeah.
That wouldn't happen.
No.
Matt would have wound up in deep space.
Oh.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's one of my fears, man. John, I know that's never going to happen, but listen to me.
Just stay anchored to Earth.
No, like you're in space and then something like, oh my gosh, because the pressure.
Yeah.
I've heard what would happen to you, and you would basically like bubble up like a balloon, right?
That's why those guys, when they do moonwalks, they're tethered.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So frightening to think about.
Yeah.
What that would feel like, the pain. I mean, it would be pretty quick.
It might be really slow and horrible as you float away from your mothership and realize you're never coming back.
John, this is nightmare fuel for me right now.
Yeah.
So, okay. Do you think, because we find life and microbial life specifically in some of the craziest places on Earth, and I was astounded when I found out that there are certain microbes and germs that can live in boiling water or really acidic water. Do you think it's possible that there's microbial life deep within Mars's like crust?
That's a legitimate hypothesis because it can't live on the surface environment because it's too hazardous. It's too extreme, and no microbe we know could handle that. But if you get down deep where there is water and where it's sheltered from all this terrible radiation that comes into the surface, it's possible that there could be something down there that's today. It's just it's an engineering challenge that's not doable right now because you'd have to drill down, go down like 1,000 feet. 2,000 feet, something like that.
Yeah.
And to the technology to do that would be too heavy to take to Mars.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So we would probably have to have a lot of steps before that, like colonizing a certain part and getting the parts slowly there before we could really dig deep.
Yeah, or get astronauts there because they're going to be more adept at building a facility that could drill deeply.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah, we know how to drill oil wells on Earth. We just have to get all the stuff up there to do that.
Kind of like in Armageddon. Have you seen Armageddon?
No.
Oh my gosh. There's a great story about that. I would like you to watch Armageddon. It's about a group of there's an asteroid headed towards Earth. Spoiler alert, this film came out in like 1999, I think. So we've had plenty of time.
That's the era of not good science fiction.
That's true. What about Jurassic Park? John?
It's okay.
John.
It's okay. I'll work with you. No, I liked it. I watched it twice.
I'm joking. There's a lot of plot holes in Jurassic Park, as much as I love it. Armageddon, there's an asteroid headed towards Earth, okay? And they want to instead of sending a team of astronauts to drill into the asteroid and put a nuke in there to make it explode into a bunch of pieces, they send a group of oil drillers and teach them how to be astronauts. And there's a great story of Ben Affleck asking the director, he's like, wait a minute, wouldn't it be easier to like train the astronauts to drill rather than oil drillers to be astronauts? And I think the director said something like, can you just shut up and say your lines?
I love it. Because you're right.
Yeah.
That's what the astronauts do. They get trained how to do stuff that's less challenging than becoming an astronaut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, sorry, I just went on. This is the show, by the way. We just go on these weird side tangents sometimes.
By the way, I had somebody that worked in my lab who became an astronaut. She was just in space last year. She just came back.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Did she tell you about her experience at all?
Oh, yeah. She blogged it. We had all kinds of video calls and stuff like that. Yeah, she went to the space station. 6 months. That's how you get trained. And then NASA will select people to go to the moon. Maybe she'll make it.
I want to feel that weightlessness, man.
Oh, she had plenty of it.
I want to know what that feels like. Have you ever experienced that? Like high altitude airplane or
Nope,
anything? Okay.
I'm out.
You're out?
Oh, yeah. No, I don't like that.
Mr. Jumping out of... Wait a minute, John.
No, there's still gravity when you land a helicopter.
True, but like that's too extreme for you.
No, weightlessness and roller coasters and that kind of stuff doesn't go well with me.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you mean, like physically? Like,
yeah, I like
oh,
to keep my lunch.
Ah,
Yeah.
you get a little nauseous. Okay,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
fair. That's
yeah.
fair. Have you gone skydiving before?
Nope.
Okay. I don't like roller coasters anymore because I've gone skydiving, and because I'm like, it's the best.
That
Skydiving's
trumps
the best.
them all.
Yeah, and by the way, I didn't get nauseous while skydiving, but I do get nauseous on roller coasters if I don't do that thing that Air Force pilots do.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
The grunt. Yeah.
John knows what I'm talking about. Peyton, it's a real thing.
I'm not judging you.
All right. I'm just making sure. Peyton. So you worked for about 7 years on the program, right?
Yep.
What's some of your most exciting moments working in that program?
Yeah, why don't I pick two? One that's the most exciting and one that was the most challenging.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So the exciting one was, here's the deal. NASA has a budget, and it gives a big portion of it to what's called the Mars program that does these missions every 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're rolling along, and then it's your turn to try to hit it out of the park. And it all comes down to choosing the right place to land, because you don't get two places to land. There's one rover. It's only going to land in one place. And there's a lot of tension leading up to the whole selection of the landing site. You got the whole planet, and how do you reduce it to one spot? And so when you do that, it's a big communal effort that I led the team with. We picked the place, and then you go there, and all the engineers, they have something that's called 7 minutes of terror. And that's the time that it takes the signal when the spacecraft is landing on Mars. It's beeping back to Earth, things that geeks call semaphore tones. And so it's different tones of beeps. And when they come back, there's a good tone and a bad tone. And so you watch the engineers, you watch the body language, and they're all lit up because it's a good tone, good tone, good tone. And then suddenly everybody's jumping up and down who's an engineer because they know it's safe. So they call that the 7 minutes of terror. And when it's over, you're done. But the scientists then, as soon as they're done, those guys have a big party. They're unemployed. They've accomplished their goal. But now the science starts, and it turns out to be 7 months of terror because you're wondering, the rover goes slowly. It's not like a human being, and you're plodding along, looking at the rocks, hoping to find pay dirt.
Yeah.
And you got 2 years to do it. That's the life of the mission. And so we did it in 6 months. And so I would say that was the greatest, if you will, the moment of triumph is we get up to a rock, we get our drill out, we sample it, and we discover everything that we were hoping to find in the first drill hole.
Whoa.
So we were prepared to drill 20 or 30 in order to define success. But by making a decision, once we landed and saw the terrain that was sort of out of the box, we can revisit it. I won't go into any detail. But this is the patent thing. Planning is everything, but plans are useless. Like if you become a slave to your plan, it limits potential rapid discovery. So
I'm sorry. I love that. Can you say that again? If you be a slave to your plan, what was it?
Yeah. So basically, you say in any kind of a workflow, here's our plan, and everybody stick to it. And then you execute the plan, data comes in, and you're like, somebody says, that data doesn't fit. Can we talk about this? No, stick to the plan. And so, one of the greatest moments of science is when somebody realizes this doesn't fit. And then you take the risk to reevaluate your entire plan and change it. So we did that. And it led us in the opposite direction that we had told the media, we had told NASA headquarters, we had paid the taxpayers, of course, who, all these interviews that we had done. We're going to be driving over there towards the mountain. And when you land, you better get going. And then we actually drove in the opposite direction and hit pay dirt. So that was really great. That was gratifying.
Wow.
Yeah, but it was months and months of tension. Yeah.
Did you get any pushback from the higher ups?
Not really.
Okay.
They're good. They basically they're not micromanagers. They choose you and they say, look, it's your mission. Just be responsible. So before we made the decision, we ran it by them, and they asked a lot of tough questions, and they were satisfied. So we got permission to do it.
That's great.
Yeah,
I love that.
yeah, it was awesome.
And what'd you find?
We found organic compounds. So we found a rock that was formed in water. It was an ancient lake. We found rivers that flowed into the lake, got the whole system, and then we found something that's the kind of rock that starts off, if you think about a swamp, you go into it, doesn't smell good, it's got a lot of organic matter in it. It's not exactly like that, but it was a rock that preserved organic compounds, so we had an instrument that could demonstrate that. And that's important because if you want to return rocks to Earth, you would like to return ones that have organic compounds because all life is organic compound. Now, let me just say one other thing. If you find an organic compound, that does not mean you have life. And our instruments were not sophisticated enough to make that distinction. So there's a lot of organic compounds that are floating around in the solar system that are what we call abiotic. Abiotic. They have nothing to do with life. And so we don't know what it was, but it was what we were intending to discover. And then when NASA heard that, they said, great, now we go ahead with the next decade. Let's bring some rocks back.
Question, and please forgive my ignorance because I don't know anything about these instruments. Why didn't you as the team, why didn't you put an instrument on there that would detect life, John?
Yeah.
That's so ridiculous to say.
No.
To somebody who
Such a
planned
good
a
question.
robot to go to another planet. It's so insane. I'm sorry.
No, it's not, because basically you know how to do it scientifically, but we can't build something that has low enough weight to be able to send there. The instruments that we have on Earth that could make those measurements would fill up this room and the one next to it. They're huge.
They're too big. Okay.
Yeah. So the simpler option is find the right rocks and then go get some that are like that and bring them back and use our instruments here on Earth that will really be able to know this.
Great.
Yeah.
That clarifies it.
That's why we're bringing the rocks back, because we can't do it on Mars. Yeah.
This is going to be a tough question. And I want to make sure I phrase this right. I feel like, what happens if we do bring the rocks back? Well, I guess, yeah. I mean, man, it's such a. Okay, we bring the rocks back, and let's say we discover that, oh my gosh, this came from, like, some kind of microbial life. That's a possibility, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that would? I mean, that's a huge discovery. I mean, doesn't that like keep you up at night a little bit? Like, I don't know, like for me, because I feel like there would be a big shift in the human psyche and the understanding of what life is and just our identity as living organisms, sentient beings. Does that make sense? Yeah. I feel like it's a pretty heavy thing to be on the cusp of.
Yeah.
Constantly. Does that, I don't know, does that weigh on you? Does that make you even more excited about what you do?
You know, it really does. And I would say in the last 30 years of my career, everything that we see about our solar system suggests that it's more and more likely that could have happened. Mm-hmm. Now, life could have originated, but we may not be able to discover that, right? So that gets us back to the whole, what is it that scientists do? They discover things that they never knew. Mm-hmm. And with geology, there could be life, and there's a way to make a rock that will preserve it, and there's a way to make a rock that won't preserve it. So it's possible that we have to be careful if we don't find it. It doesn't mean it wasn't there, but it means it's going to get harder to figure out how to find it if it was there. So let's imagine your scenario where we do find life. I have two universes that I imagine.
Okay.
One is that the science community and a lot of the educated and insightful public will realize, wow, this takes the shackles off of the concept that life is unique to Earth. Like if we find it on Mars, it could be everywhere. That's sort of the existential proof that life could be universal rather than particular. Here's the other option. We find it, and I like to show this in my public lectures just to stay sober about this. Not everybody is going to feel that way. So there's a great cartoon, and it's got a couple of frames, and in the first one there's a couple of kids sitting there, heads in their palms, looking at the TV. And one of them says, oh, look, NASA claims they discovered life on Mars. And the second frame, the other kid says, well, what is it? In the third frame, the kid goes, something called microbes. Fourth frame, who would care? Fifth frame, geologists. So, so I think like anything else, what it means to you in particular depends what your context is, how you appreciate the universe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it tough as a scientist to compartmentalize maybe your bias, or are you just completely, or like your hopes of what you might think? Because sometimes, for instance, and I'll give an example. I see a friend of mine in a TV show. I'm enjoying it more because I know them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, do you have to compartmentalize like your personal beliefs, your personal bias whenever you're doing this research?
Absolutely. Yeah, you can't lose control of the observations and the facts and the way to an interpretation. That's the most important thing we do as scientists, is try not to be influenced by things that we would call, for example, a confirmation bias, so that you are predisposed to look for things that will fit your theory or hypothesis rather than contradict it, that would lead to you discarding it and starting all over again. It's a lot of work to start all over again. And in the world in which we live, where science is sort of challenged increasingly, what good is it for me? Everybody wants to know, what good is it for me? How's it going to increase our standard of health and well-being? Everything is getting more and more applied. People want to skip quickly the fundamental step of pure science, and there's two ways that we do that. I'll lap back to it, and get on with, let's apply this. What does it mean for me? But the whole notion of just simple discovery is embodied and underpins everything that we do that allows applied science to occur. And so basically, I break that down into two concepts, one of which is what we call, to get geeky here for a minute, inductive science. And what that means is we observe something and seek to explain. So check something out, look at it, it does something, and we say, oh, well, this is how it might work. And there's no hypothesis there. We're just observing. But the more we observe, then we can narrow it down, and we go into what I like. Okay, so the first one is the Star Trek mode. We're going to go where no man has been before and observe strange worlds.
Yeah.
That's immature science. A more mature science is the Sherlock Holmes mode, what we call deductive science, where you have an idea, a hypothesis, and now you're going to interrogate the witnesses and try to figure out who done it. And so that's kind of where we are right now with the search for life on another planet. We have particular hypotheses, but it's going to take a while to figure it out. And what we can't do is, because our funding that we get from NASA is dependent on the search for life being the number one priority for what we're doing, we got to be careful to not tell everybody that everything we're doing is the search for life, because then it's sort of like crying wolf. And at some point, people are going to say, have you found it yet? Oh, you haven't? We're cutting your funding. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All
So there's a real risk of a bias that comes in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another one of my favorite, I guess you could call it science fiction movies, is Europa. Have you seen this? It's one that's like a found footage. I'm surprised you've seen it. It's so like not as well known. Have you guys seen it, Europa? Yeah. What'd you think about that one?
Goofy.
Goofy? Oh man.
So there's a fun thing. Before I was at Caltech, I was at MIT. And we're full of science nerds, right?
Yeah.
So there's a film festival every year called Cartoon Physics, where people look at every film. Like my favorite is The Core, is a geologist. Have you seen The Core?
Oh yeah. Oh my God.
If they don't blow it up with a nuke and get it to start, being liquid again, we're all going to die because we lose the magnetosphere.
Yeah.
So basically, everybody watches these things and has fun with them. So sooner or later, you see everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, because this is coming from somebody who doesn't. This feels a little ridiculous, but I feel I'm going to open up my vulnerability and my ignorance. I always look at octopuses and I'm like, this is the most bizarre creature. I always feel like if there isn't like some kind of alien on Earth, it's something in the deep sea. You know what I mean? It's so different from everything that's...
Flashlight fish?
The what?
Flashlight fish?
Oh, the ones with the little...
Yeah, they glow in the dark. Talk about creepy.
Yeah, it's bonkers to see what's evolved over the course of years. Kind of bringing back to the topic of geology. I'd like you to explain to me how we could figure out the age of things and why that's so certain. You know, like, what is it? Carbon dating, right?
That's one of them.
That's one of them. What's another way that we know for sure the age of things?
Yeah, so all these dating schemes are based on a physical phenomenon called radioactive decay. So you maybe remember at some point you had chemistry, might have been in high school, this thing called the periodic table and all these symbols that represent different elements. Well, some of them are radioactive. And so as time goes by, they change their state and they change from one element into another element. But we know how fast that occurs. So, for example, uranium decays to lead, and it does. It just.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Yeah. That was important when scientists and engineers were building the first atomic bomb. They had to generate a lot of uranium, and it would decay to lead. So you have to do it in the right way. So as a result of that, that's how they discovered and were able to measure what's called its half-life. I won't go into that, but that's basically something that tells you how fast this process happens.
Okay.
So if in the beginning you start out with 10 units of the first element, and then at some later time, you only have 2 units left, you know that it's changing, but you don't know how fast it's changing. So if somebody tells you how fast it changes from 10 to 2, then you can do the math and figure it out. So we know how fast these elements change, and the hard part is to measure how much we have of what's called the parent and how much of the daughter is there. That's the language that we use.
Okay.
Parent, daughter. So there are a lot of elements that some of them decay over billions of years, some of them decay over hundreds of millions of years. Carbon, the one that you mentioned, decays over thousands of years. Wow. And so all we have to do is find a material. It doesn't have to be rock. It could be a soil or a fossil bone, and get some of that stuff and analyze it, and then we can figure out how old it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so, what was the other way? Wait, was that the other way?
Well, there's just different elements that allow you to date. So, like carbon, okay. Like if you have a rock that's 1 million years old, there won't be any C14 left in it.
Okay.
It decays so quickly. There's only daughter. There won't be any parent left.
C14 is carbon, okay.
That's a form of carbon.
A form of carbon.
Yeah.
I'm pretty smart.
Yeah,
I like
that
good
one.
Yeah.
Nailed it.
Yeah, nailed it, man.
Yeah.
That's gonna be in the highlight reel. All right. Are you training for another triathlon or Ironman anytime soon?
No, I'm into cycling right now.
Cycling. Okay.
I'm training for a bike race in May. Yeah.
You're a beast, man. That's crazy.
Keeps you sane. That's how I got into it. Never did any of this stuff until I turned 60.
Wow.
Yeah. Because when you work on these missions, it's like 18 hours a day, and it's there's a lot of tension.
Yeah.
And also the administrative position I have right now. And my daughter said, "Dad, you need to get off the sofa. You need to go do something." Mm-hmm. And so we did
So you chose the hardest thing to do?
No. We started small. So my daughters, who were both swimmers, are like, "Dad, there's a little short race. It'll be over in like 45 minutes." So we did that. I got interested. They walked away. Mm-hmm. Mission accomplished.
Yeah.
And I realized that actually getting back to my disposition as a kid, this is really relaxing. And what I've discovered really is that the triathlon was just sort of a fun challenge, but I really enjoy the cycling because we've got great mountains around here, and my favorite type of riding is to get up there on all these old fire roads. When there's a forest fire, the mountains are burning, they're all driving around on these roads, and when it's not burning, it's a great place to ride. No cars, no chance to get hit by a car, and you just get to watch the world go by.
That's awesome.
Very relaxing.
You've gotten to jump out of a helicopter, you said, into Alcatraz? Or from Alcatraz?
Jump out of a boat.
Boat. Oh, sorry. I thought it was a helicopter for some reason. In my mind, I'm imagining you jumping out of a helicopter into the bay near Alcatraz and starting your Ironman. That's what I'm imagining.
No. That would be a student I've just got. My last graduate student, PhD student, and he was a former Navy SEAL.
Oh, wow.
And we were talking. He goes, "John, I don't need much. Just drop me out of the helicopter. I don't even need food."
That's hilarious. We're taking one more commercial break, and we'll be right back. And we're back.
It's amazing.
It's amazing. Feels like
Yeah.
no time has gone by. Yeah, those Navy SEALs are amazing what they can do in the water.
Yeah.
I always love watching the Hell Week for Navy SEALs or Army Rangers and see what they have to go through. I feel like if my life took a different course of action earlier on, I'd probably join some sort of special forces.
It's pretty cool.
It's amazing.
Yeah, this guy has incredible discipline, so focused, just everything is can do.
Yeah.
It's nice.
It's a great attitude to have,
Yeah,
right?
It is.
I love it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I just blanked out briefly. Okay, here comes the fun part, John.
Yeah.
Northern Canada, Siberia, correct? Middle East, Africa, South America?
Nope.
South America, you were just like, no, I'm done with. No, I can't.
Yeah, no, I worked in Brazil a little bit, but it didn't stick.
It didn't stick.
Didn't stick.
Okay, you didn't like Brazil?
I loved Brazil. Loved the people. The geology was fascinating, but it's not if you're going to look at rocks, you need to look at rocks, and it's too much soil. It's just flat, and it's not like mountains. I like to be where there's mountains, where you can. If you're going to look at rocks, let's look at lots of them without a lot of effort.
Yeah.
Well, you have to walk around. It's hard to work on the mountains, but you get to see a lot of them. The more you see, the more it's like doing a jigsaw puzzle. Geology is like a jigsaw puzzle. Do you do puzzles?
I have done puzzles. Yeah.
So imagine that, like I always thought if I had to go about selecting students, instead of giving them like SAT test or looking at their grade point average, I would just have them show up and give them a puzzle where I've taken all the edges and corners away and just say, mess it all up. Here, have at it for an hour. I'm going to go get a coffee. And so geological mapping is like looking at these patterns and colors and shapes, and it's actually it's a different part of your brain than doing things like solving math equations, but you do it walking around. And so you look at this rock and you say there's a piece in the puzzle, and then you go to the next one, you see how they all match up. So that's why I found out that I like to work in remote areas, because there's less competition there.
Yeah.
And also because there's been less work done, it's more like solving a difficult puzzle like that. Yeah.
What's the craziest thing you found? Like a person in there.
Oh my God! Now
Uh-oh.
you jog my memory. I haven't thought of this in a long time. Yeah, the craziest thing that happened to me was the summer of '79.
Love the way you started that story.
Whoa.
Let's go.
Okay, here we go. So basically, I have just got my undergraduate degree.
All right.
And I got an internship with the Geological Survey of Canada, which was the first time I ever went north, like way north of the Arctic Circle. So we are living in the middle of nowhere. So you fly, from me, I flew from New York, get on the plane in Kennedy, transfer in Toronto, go to Edmonton, change planes, go to Yellowknife, which is the capital of what was then the Northwest Territories. And then from there, you get in a bush plane, pick an old pilot. The old ones have made mistakes and recovered. So anyway, we got an old pilot. The guy took us up there. We land in a snowstorm on an ice-covered lake at the end of May. and so this guy, we arrive on the ice. I have no idea. I am so green, have no idea what's going on. And the guy that I'm working for, he's a pro, and he's just throwing gear out, and the pilot's throwing gear out because he wants to go home. So he throws everything out, and I'm standing there feeling like a lost puppy. He closes the bay doors to the airplane, and before he does it, he looks out at it and goes, God, I feel sorry for you guys. Every time I do this, I sure am glad I never went to college. Closes the door, flies off, and I'm there for a month before it gets warm enough to melt the ice, and then we get more food. So about a month into it, everybody's starting to get pretty scraggly. It's exhausting, it's tiring, the days are long, and we're walking long distances. And one day, me and this other guy, we're walking and walking. There's a lot of lakes up there. And we come up to a lake, and it's taken forever to walk around this lake. And we're tired, exhausted, and we hear some noise, and we're like, what is this? And And then we stop and listen, and we realize it's a human being. And there shouldn't be any human beings up there. And so we get closer, and we look out across the lake, and here comes this guy in a canoe, paddling as fast as he can, and it's sinking. And he barely makes it to the shoreline, and we realize that this guy looks like Rip Van Winkle, like it's just lost in time. Long beard, disheveled, barely alive, it turns out. And so this was some dude from New York City who had enough of city living, and he decided he was going to fly up to Yellowknife, get in a bush plane, pay some guy to just drop him off with a canoe and a gun. And he was going to last a winter. He shot a bear, skinned it, rolled up in the bear skin, went into a crack in the rock. He had no tent, and he spent all winter in the crack in the rock. And he was steadily dying until we discovered him.
What?
That was the strangest thing that's ever happened to me in the field. Nothing's ever come close to it.
Whoa.
Yeah.
So what happened when he saw you guys? He was like, help.
Panicked. Like he couldn't speak. And we're like, dude, take it easy. We're like, what do we do? We're 18 miles away from our camp, and we have to walk back.
Right.
Yeah. And we knew it was going to take, the sun's up all night long, right? Because it's way north in the summer. It never gets dark.
Yeah.
So we had planned this epic traverse, and of course this guy happened to be at the end of it. And we're like, okay, this guy's been able to survive by himself for a long time. If one of us gets hurt, we don't know if we can survive. So the two of us are going back, and buddy, you're going to stay here, and we promise we'll come back. And talk about lost puppy. The look on this guy's face when we walked away, I've never felt a more sinking feeling in my entire life. So we practically ran back to camp. We made it. We talked to our boss. He gets the airplane that we had chartered. Airplane goes with the pilot, picks the guy up, throws all his stuff in there, flies him back to Yellowknife, and the newspaper then the next day says, bush pilot discovers lost human being. So we don't know this. We don't even know anything till we get back 2 months later.
Yeah.
Because there's no social media. There's no cell phones. You have no contact. You're all by yourself. You have snail mail once a month.
What happened to the guy?
The guy apparently recovered, and we always thought he would write a book. But we were kind of pissed because we found this guy.
Yeah.
And the bush pilot took all the credit. So that was important for me as a scientist. You got to get yours.
Yeah.
And so we have all kinds of turf battles about whose idea was that, who deserves credit, who should be an author on the publication. I'm sure this never happens in playwriting.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
TV writing.
TV writing. Yeah.
Joke stealing. Yeah.
Okay,
Like comedians.
there you go.
Yeah.
So we found this guy. And nobody ever knew. When the internet came around, I started to stalk the guy. I could never find a hot trail.
Man.
Yeah, no clue.
Man.
I think he's lucky he had been alive, and he probably went away and went back into hermit mode, but more responsibly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. By the way, to do what he did, imagine how fed up he must have been to be like, I'm done.
What's the probability? There are tens of thousands of lakes up there. So I think back on that, and I wonder, these things that could be coincidences.
You think so? Coincidence?
I don't know, right?
You think it's something more than that, or just coincidence?
As a scientist, I have to say it was a coincidence.
All right.
But you wonder, right?
Yeah, it makes you wonder.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I think there's something more. Me personally, just think that that's crazy. I mean, the chances of that happening.
Really small.
And what if you guys weren't there in an hour? And what if his canoe sank?
Timing, contingency, right? Everything.
That's what I mean. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Wow. I don't know if you're going to top that story.
No, I couldn't. I could tell you stories about Siberia, but that probably can't beat that. It mostly involves vodka.
Yeah. Well, I do. I had a really bad case of. I don't know if it's what it's called. I drank the water in Mexico. And that was a nightmare. And that's one of my fears of traveling. I'm not scared of people. I'm not scared of animals. I'm scared of getting sick. It's so miserable because you can't do anything. You can't enjoy anything. Have you gotten really sick in all your travels before?
Really sick in Siberia.
Okay, here we go. We're going
Yep.
back to Siberia.
Well, so, basically, I worked there one summer, 1990. Gorbachev had just come in. Russia was opening up this concept called glasnost, which is we're going to open up to the Western world.
Yeah.
So we were welcomed in, a team of us. I was with a guy from Harvard, and we met up with a bunch of Russian geologists, and we went to a part of Siberia where nobody in the Western world had been since before World War II. So that's my kind of area. You're guaranteed to find something interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, so off we go. And the first time I went, we arrived, you land in Moscow, you transfer from the international terminal to the domestic terminal. It's a huge country. You fly all night again till you get to a town called Yakutsk, which is in southern Siberia. You get in another airplane and you fly all the way north of the Arctic Circle to where you get to the Arctic Ocean, and then there's a military base there. And then from there, you get set out on a helicopter onto a river where you have a rubber raft that you float down and you do your geology along the way. And so that's what we did the first year. In the second year, there was a different group that was funding our research, and they sent the cash over to Russia ahead of time. And so we arrive, and we're expecting the same deal. We're going to get in an airplane, we're going to fly north. Nope. They converted it into vodka. They took all the money, converted it into vodka, because cash doesn't mean anything in Siberia. It's all medieval, feudal bartering. What do you got that I need? Because this cash isn't going to help me. I want your caribou for food. I'll give you potatoes that I've grown. And if you got something, the only thing I've got that I know you're going to want is vodka. So basically, we got on a boat. The cheapest thing for them to do was to pocket some of the money and then fill the boat up with vodka. We get on the boat, we go down the river and barter the whole way. When the boat was out of gas, we stopped, pulled up to a tanker, and off went the vodka, and in came the gas. Cash was useless. Anyway, so it took us 3 weeks to go down the river. It would be like going from New Orleans from St. Louis to New Orleans. We went down river.
On a boat?
On a small tugboat.
John, I was on a cruise for 5 days. I wanted to jump overboard.
Yeah, trust me, I hear you on that. We had no choice. Off we go. So, how do they get the water? Well, whatever they're cooking, they just scoop it up out of the river.
No.
Oh, yeah. And, of course, all these settlements that are along the river, everybody's flushing their toilets, and it goes right into the river.
John.
Yeah. I got so sick. Lost 25 pounds.
What?
Yeah. The whole thing, it was probably the most miserable field experience I've had.
Peyton, you'd die. I think you would just die.
I would just drop dead. Yeah, probably. I'd probably
And guess what? I'd die with you.
we died together.
We die together.
You
miserable.
eat me.
I couldn't eat you. I'd be so sad if I had to eat
I'd
you.
last like a day, just skin and bones.
John, I got to commend you for just sticking to it, because I think
Well, there was no way to get out.
there's no way. You can't
No,
take me back.
No, you sit in your bunk and you're miserable. There's no geology to do. There's nothing to do. You just feel awful.
What do you do all day then?
Nothing. So, no, I'll tell you what I did. I decided I would read Russian literature. You ever heard of the book Crime and Punishment?
Yeah.
Yeah. Raskolnikov does the deed, and then you are punished, and read the rest of the book.
Man.
Yeah.
All right. Our time on Adobe Radio has come to an end. However, the show will continue on. Make sure you follow us on YouTube if you want to see the episode, and the full episode is up on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you all next week. Bye. The show continues on. 3 weeks on a tugboat in Siberia, in Russia, and you're drinking terrible water that's making you sick. You lose 25 pounds. When you get to your destination, what is that feeling like?
Incapacitated. So basically, we get to our destination. It took 3 days to do the work without rushing it, because you feel crappy. And then you turn around and you go all the way back against the current. 4 weeks. Yeah.
Did you lose 35 pounds this
No,
that
was,
way?
that was the total.
The total, okay.
But I decided that I was not eating what they were cooking anymore.
What were they cooking?
Not sure. Not sure. A lot of potatoes. We were eating potatoes like crazy. The turnaround happened when these guys saw a caribou on the shore and they shot it.
Yeah.
Cleaned it, and of course, this is all permafrost up there. The water's freezing. It's barely above freezing. So they dragged this caribou behind the boat on a rope, and every day they'd whack off a piece of meat. And I'm like, I want that meat, and I'm cooking it myself.
Yeah.
So through doing nothing but eating meat that was well cooked, boiled water for 15 minutes, you boil the water, you take the piece of meat that you're going to eat, put it in there for 15 minutes, and I made a comeback.
John, that's incredible.
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
So whenever that part was done and you're going back home.
Okay, here comes the fun part. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm going back home,
Yeah.
but I need to go on to Africa. So I have to change planes in Moscow, go to Frankfurt, and then from there to Africa. So my wife comes over from Boston. We're living in Boston at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And Grotzinger is a German name, and I had some relatives that were there that I didn't know well. And they're all women in their 80s because the men were killed in the war. And so I said to my wife, come on over. We're just going to tour around. We'll go visit my relatives that I barely know, and they'll feed me. So she came over. We'd go out to so it took her 4 days to get over there. I'm in Frankfurt. So every morning I'd wake up, go out and eat, go to a restaurant and eat, go back, sleep, go out to lunch, go eat, come back, go to dinner, eat, drink a lot of beer, come back, do that after 4 days, starting to feel better. So basically, then she and I were together for about a week, and then I went down to Africa. She went home, I went to Africa.
Yeah. Wow.
So that was a good comeback.
Bro.
Yeah.
I remember it does not compare to you, and that's why I can only imagine the feeling of eating like good food for the first time and like just being like back into like a safe space, because I remember I was in Mexico for a little over 3 weeks, and the last 2 nights were night shoots, and then that following morning I was like, get me out of here. And I'm gonna
won't go.
I'm gonna get a little graphic on here. I mean, I was having stomach pains toward the last week, and I was just it was just water. Just, you know what I mean? Like nothing. There was no. It was, and I stomach pains. I wasn't feeling good, and I remember I went to the set medic the second night, and I'm like, whatever you have in your bag, give me 2 of, because I can't take it anymore. Like I'm gonna go to the hospital if this keeps going. So he gives me enough stuff to get me on the plane, and I remember I had a layover in I think Dallas or Houston from Mexico. And I remember just going, oh my God, I just want to some kind of like bread. I just want fresh bread, just something solid in my stomach. And I saw this like Italian pizza, like authentic Italian eatery or whatever in the airport. I was like, and they had like a legit, you know those pizzas, they don't have any cheese on them, it's just tomato sauce.
Yes.
It's like a very like very authentic Italian thing to eat. And I'm like, get me one of those. I remember taking that first bite, John. I will never forget. I was like, oh my God. And that was just me in Mexico, safe, not on a tugboat.
Yeah, but
Wow.
that feeling you have, it's just terrible, just a feeling of helplessness.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I would. Did you feel like you were going a little crazy too?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, not a good headspace. So I didn't go back there. I decided after that summer I was going to work in deserts for the rest of my life, and that's pretty much what I did. So
Yeah.
Africa's a desert. The Middle East was a desert. Great. You're out there in the sand dunes with the Bedouin people hanging out, and
Man,
I never got sick eating kebabs.
it's hard to get sick eating kebabs. It's hard.
The taste really good.
Aren't they great?
I didn't get sick.
I remember once there's this traditional dish from back home. It's called kibbe nei. Have you ever heard of this? Kibbe?
I'm sure. I don't remember it.
Basically, it's like raw meat, but they mix it with burro.
No, that doesn't sound like it's going to end well.
Well, it's kind of like a tartare. Have you had beef tartare?
Oh,
yeah, it's
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
like that, but with lamb.
Ah.
And with a little bit of a grain mixed
No,
in.
have not had that.
It tastes amazing. And it was my first time eating it. And I was like, oh, I'm going to town on this. Well, my stomach was not ready for that. Yeah.
I could guess. Yeah.
Yeah, but it tasted great.
Yeah.
Anyway, John, before you go, I just want to make sure we covered all the stories and everything. Is there anything else you want to share with us before you go?
No, that sort of covers. That's a broad swath of the action.
Yeah.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you so much for coming in.
Sam, thanks for having me.
This was an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, fun.
And if I'll tell you what, if they discover life on Mars,
I'll come back.
Yeah, you'll come back, and
For
we'll
sure.
go a lot more in depth with that, and what does that mean for the human race, and is Elon going to get there first? Do you think we'll colonize in our lifetime before we wrap up?
No.
No. Too hard, and inflation-adjusted dollars. NASA spent trillions back in the 1960s to get man on the moon in 10 years. We're not doing that. And technology is advancing quickly, but you got to really be focused to do that. Awesome.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, too, we'll also talk about cataclysmic events the next time you're on.
Oh.
I'd love to talk a little bit more about that.
They're important.
Yeah. Yeah, they're big resets for the entire industry.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for coming on. Absolute pleasure. You're welcome back anytime. And we're going to end today's show a little special, if you don't mind. It's
Okay.
our producer Peyton's birthday.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my goodness! Wait a minute.
Happy birthday, dude.
Oh my goodness! Thank you.
So people can see.
Yeah. There you go, man.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Come over here and blow it out. You can.
I'll come over
Come
there.
around.
Oh goodness.
How old are you?
Hope it doesn't catch on fire.
Oh, how old am I? What is this gonna be? This is 27.
Nice.
This is 27.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yay. Happy birthday, dude.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah. 27.
27.
Yeah, this is his last episode, too. No,
Really?
I'm kidding. No, I'm kidding.
We're firing him.
We're firing him.
He's too old.
Well, Peyton, many more to come, man.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
I got you a little present outside, too. We'll open it
thank
outside.
you.
Yeah. But before we go, you know what's up. Play us out, Peyton. Boom.
Boom.
Boom. What a great episode. If you enjoyed today's episode, leave a comment below. Make sure you hit the bell icon and subscribe to our channel for all the latest updates. Special episode coming next week as well. And always remember to listen, think, and then talk. Bye.